In 1914, the United States was not the richest country on earth. It was not the world's banker. It was not the financial center of the globe. Europe was. London controlled global capital flows. British banks financed international trade. The pound sterling acted as the world's reserve currency. Insurance markets, shipping finance, and long-term credit all ran through Europe. The United States mattered, but it followed rather than led. 4 years later, everything changed. By the end of World War I, the United States held most of the world's gold. It controlled global credit. It replaced London with New York as the center of finance. No invasion, no battle on American soil, just money, debt, and timing. This is the story of how World War I quietly transformed the United States into the richest and most powerful financial nation in history. In the early 20th century, the United States was industrializing at extraordinary speed. Steel production surged, railroads stretched coast to coast, cities expanded, immigration fueled labor supply, output grew year after year. But financial power lagged behind industrial power. American railroads, factories, and utilities had been built using European capital. British, French, and German investors financed American growth throughout the 19th century. Interest payments flowed outward. Profits returned overseas. The United States was a debtor nation. American banks focused inward. Few operated internationally. Few held large foreign reserves. Few influenced global lending terms. The dollar lacked prestige. The pound sterling dominated trade settlement. Gold often flowed out of the United States to settle debts. In 1913, just 1 year before the war, the U.S. financial system still struggled with instability. Banking panics were common, credit shortages frequent, trust in banks fragile. That instability forced reform. The Federal Reserve was created in 1913 to stabilize banking, manage liquidity, and prevent crises. It was new, untested, unproven. No one expected it to soon face the greatest financial shock in modern history. Europe entered 1914 as the financial center of the world. London was the hub of global payments. British banks financed shipping, insurance, and trade. European capital flowed into Asia, Africa, Latin America, and North America. European governments borrowed cheaply. European currencies remained stable. European markets controlled risk pricing. This system depended on peace. It assumed open trade routes, predictable payments, stable governments. World War I shattered those assumptions overnight. When war broke out in the summer of 1914, financial markets collapsed immediately. Stock exchanges closed, international payments froze, shipping insurance vanished, gold movements accelerated. European governments faced a sudden problem. They needed money, immediately, at unprecedented scale. Modern industrial war consumes resources faster than any conflict in history. Millions of soldiers needed weapons, food, uniforms, ammunition, fuel, and transport. Governments printed money. They issued debt. They borrowed aggressively. But war destroyed investor confidence. European banks stopped lending internationally. Private capital fled to safety. Credit markets seized. The global financial system fractured. The United States declared neutrality. No troops were sent. No battles fought, no cities destroyed. But neutrality did not mean inactivity. It meant trade. European nations still needed supplies, and American industries stood ready. American factories produced steel, rifles, artillery shells, trucks, railroad equipment, machinery. American farms exported wheat, corn, beef, pork. Exports surged. Between 1914 and 1917, American exports nearly tripled. Industrial output expanded rapidly. Employment rose. Corporate profits climbed. But trade alone did not create financial dominance. Credit did. At first, Europe paid for American goods with gold, but gold ran out quickly. War drained reserves. Currencies weakened. Budgets exploded. European governments turned to borrowing. American banks hesitated at first. Lending to warring nations carried risk. Defaults were possible, but demand was overwhelming. Returns were high, collateral strong, political pressure intense. Gradually, American banks extended credit. Loans funded purchases. Purchases funded production. Production funded growth. By 1916, the United States was no longer just a supplier. It was a lender. This marked the turning point. A lender gains leverage. A borrower loses autonomy. Financial power began shifting west. As borrowing expanded, gold followed. European nations shipped gold across the Atlantic to settle balances and stabilize currencies. American vaults filled, European vaults emptied. By 1917, the United States held roughly 40% of the world's gold. This mattered deeply. Under the gold standard, gold meant credibility. It supported currencies. It enabled lending. It stabilized banks. Gold accumulation turned the dollar into a reliable store of value. For the first time, global investors trusted American money. When the United States entered the war in 1917, the transformation accelerated. War demanded scale. The federal government issued Liberty bonds to finance military spending. Millions of Americans purchased them. Banks coordinated distribution. Savings flowed into government debt. The Federal Reserve stepped in. It stabilized markets, managed bond issuance, provided liquidity, prevented panic. This was the Federal Reserve's first major test. It succeeded. The American financial system matured under pressure. European governments borrowed heavily from the United States. Loans funded purchases, weapons production, food imports, shipping, reconstruction planning. By 1918, European debt to the United States reached unprecedented levels. America became the world's largest creditor. This was historically unprecedented. For centuries, Europe had financed others. Now, Europe depended on American money. The war ended in November 1918. The financial shift did not reverse. Europe emerged devastated. Cities destroyed, infrastructure damaged, labor shortages severe, governments deeply indebted. Rebuilding required capital. Once again, Europe turned to the United States. American banks financed reconstruction. American firms invested abroad. American currency gained global use. The dollar began to replace the pound in trade settlements. New York replaced London as the center of global finance. Wall Street became the world's capital hub. World War I reshaped financial architecture. Key changes included the rise of the dollar as a reserve currency, the dominance of American credit markets, the central role of the Federal Reserve, the global influence of Wall Street. The United States controlled capital flows. Interest rates in New York affected economies worldwide. Financial leadership shifted permanently. The post-war decade brought growth, industrial expansion, rising wages, consumer credit, stock market growth. This prosperity did not appear suddenly. It was built on wartime financial dominance. But the system carried risks. European debts relied on continued American lending. German reparations depended on U.S. credit. Any disruption threatened collapse. When credit tightened in the late 1920s, the system cracked. The Great Depression followed. World War I created wealth. It also created fragility. Financial power came with responsibility. America's decisions affected the entire world. World War I transformed the United States because it supplied global demand. It lent when others borrowed. It accumulated gold. It stabilized finance. It avoided destruction. World War I rewarded preparation and position. The United States did not conquer wealth. It absorbed it. Modern American financial power traces back to this moment. The dollar's dominance, global banking influence, U.S. debt markets, Federal Reserve Authority, all began here. World War II expanded it, but World War I created it. When World War I began, the United States stood outside global finance. When it ended, America stood at the center, not by accident, not by luck, by lending, by producing, by staying stable while others collapsed. Wars are fought with soldiers, but wealth is built with balance sheets. This is how World War I made the United States rich. This is the hidden story of how World War I made the United States rich. If you want real money history, stories schools never teach, and the moments that quietly shaped your financial world, you are in the right place. This is the finance story. Subscribe, like, share, and comment on this video, and let's begin.